If your last name is on this list, your ancestor didn't just live through the wars that made England. They were the reason those wars happened. These 10 English surnames appear in royal charters, parliamentary rolls, and treason indictments from 1066 to the Tudor court. They belong to families who put kings on thrones and took them off again, and who lost more heads on the executioner's block than any peasant rebellion ever did. And most people carrying these names today have no idea their surname was once a political weapon. Stay until number 1, because that surname carries a secret that geneticists only confirmed in the last 15 years. And it rewrites where one of the most famous bloodlines in Britain actually came from. Number 10. York. Today it sounds like a city, or a state in America. But York comes from the Old Norse Jorvik, the Viking name for the settlement the Danes captured in the year 866. The Norse were not inventing it either. The Romans called it Iboracum, which most linguists read as place of the yew trees. 3 languages, 3 conquests, 1 name. The York families concentrated in Yorkshire and the Northern Midlands, and the surnames spread the ordinary way. People moved south, and the neighbors named them for the place they had left. It never belonged to one clan. It belonged to anyone who had walked away from the city. But the House of York was something else entirely. A branch of the Plantagenets, the dynasty that ruled England for over 300 years. It produced 3 kings in a single century: Edward IV, Edward V, and Richard III. From 1455, it fought the House of Lancaster in the Wars of the Roses, a 30-year civil war over who had the legitimate right to the throne. And here is the twist. Richard III, the last Yorkist king, died at Bosworth in 1485. The last English king killed in battle. His body was buried without ceremony in a friary in Leicester. The friary was demolished, the ground built over, and for 5 centuries nobody knew where he was. Until 2012, when archaeologists dug a trench under a council car park and found a skeleton with a curved spine and battle wounds to the skull. DNA from living descendants of his sister confirmed it. The last Plantagenet king spent 500 years under a parking space. If your surname is York, your name was once the banner men fought and died beneath. The next name is the other side of that same war, and it won a battle it had no business winning. Number 9. Lancaster. Lancaster comes from the Latin castra, meaning fort, attached to the River Lune, literally the Roman fort on the Lune. The castle still stands on the hill above the river in northwest England. And here is a detail most people do not know. The Duchy of Lancaster never merged into the Crown Estate. The reigning monarch still holds it separately, as Duke of Lancaster, and in parts of Lancashire the loyal toast is still to the Duke, not the King. The Lancaster families spread out of Lancashire and Cumbria, carried by tenants and retainers of the duchy who took the name of the estate they served, rather than any blood tie to it. It was a name of service, and there were thousands of servants. The House of Lancaster produced Henry IV, Henry V, and Henry VI. And in 1415, Henry V, his army sick with dysentery, outnumbered, and trapped in French territory while trying to reach Calais, fought at Agincourt against a French force several times the size of his own and destroyed it. The mud did half the work. French knights in full plate advanced across a plowed field, turned to sludge by days of rain, and English longbowmen cut them apart before they could close. The twist is what happened to the winners. Henry V died 7 years later, not in battle, but of dysentery, at 35. His son, Henry VI, inherited 2 crowns as an infant, suffered a complete mental collapse in his 30s, lost every French possession his father had won, and was murdered in the Tower of London in 1471. The house that produced the most celebrated victory in English military history was extinct in the male line within 2 generations of winning it. If your surname is Lancaster, your name belonged to a royal house that reached higher than any English dynasty before it, and fell faster. The next name never wore a crown. It just outlasted everyone who did. Number 8. Cavendish. Cavendish comes from a village in Suffolk, recorded in the Domesday Book as Cavendish. It is Old English, and it means Cafna's enclosure, a single fenced farmstead belonging to a man named Cafna over 1,000 years ago. One of the greatest aristocratic names in Britain started as one man's fence. The Cavendishes rose out of East Anglia and then planted themselves permanently in Derbyshire. Their anchor is 1549, the year Sir William Cavendish and his wife, Bess of Hardwicke, bought the Chatsworth estate. Bess is the reason this family exists at the level it does. Born to minor gentry with almost nothing, she married 4 times, each time upward, each time outliving the husband and keeping the property. By the end, she was one of the wealthiest people in England, and she poured that money into stone. Chatsworth and Hardwicke Hall are both hers, and here is the twist. Bess of Hardwicke was for years the jailer of Mary, Queen of Scots. Her 4th husband was given custody of the captive queen, and Mary was held in their houses for the better part of 15 years. Bess sat and embroidered with her, panel by panel, while the Elizabethan government slowly worked out whether to execute her. Some of that needlework survives in museum collections today. 2 women, one of them facing the axe, stitching together to pass the years. If your surname is Cavendish, your name belongs to a family whose seat has been continuously theirs since 1549 and is still privately owned today. The next name got its wealth by taking a monastery. If you are finding this interesting, subscribe to this channel. We publish videos like this every week, tracing the history hidden inside the names people carry every day. Hit subscribe so you never miss one. Number 7. Russell. Russell is Norman French, from rouse meaning red, with a diminutive ending attached. It means little red one. It was a nickname for a red-haired man, and after the conquest, nicknames like this hardened into inherited surnames. Somewhere in the 12th century, there was a red-headed Norman, and everyone carrying this name is downstream of that description. Russell families were concentrated first in Dorset, where they made money in the wine trade. That is how John Russell came to court. He spoke fluent Spanish, and when a Habsburg archduke was shipwrecked on the Dorset coast in 1506, Russell was the local man who could talk to him. He escorted the archduke to Henry VII and never left the court again. The anchor year is 1538. Henry VIII dissolved Woburn Abbey, hanged its last abbot from an oak tree in his own grounds for refusing the royal supremacy, and handed the land to John Russell as a reward for loyalty. The Russells became earls, then dukes of Bedford, and moved into a monastery whose abbot had been executed to make room. The twist arrives 145 years later. In 1683, Lord William Russell was beheaded in Lincoln's Inn Fields for his part in the Rye House plot against Charles II. The executioner needed several strokes. The family made by one king's favor was nearly destroyed by another king's revenge. And then, after the Glorious Revolution swept the Stuarts out 6 years later, the new regime reversed the conviction and recast him as a martyr for parliamentary liberty. The same death, 2 opposite verdicts, 6 years apart. If your surname is Russell, your name belongs to a family that shaped English constitutional history from both ends of the axe. The next name got 2 of its women into Henry VIII's bed, and both of them died for it. Number 6. Howard. Howard most likely comes from the Old Norse personal name Havardr, Ha meaning high, and Vardr meaning guardian, high guardian. Some genealogists argue instead for the Old English Hereward, army guard. Either way, the meaning circles the same idea, a name for someone who defended something. The Howards concentrated in Norfolk and Suffolk, and they have held the Dukedom of Norfolk since 1483. That is longer than any other family holds any other title in the English peerage, and it makes the Duke of Norfolk the premier Duke of England, the man who, by hereditary right, organizes coronations and state funerals. Their anchor is the Tudor court, and it very nearly destroyed them. Anne Boleyn, executed in 1536, was the daughter of Elizabeth Howard. Catherine Howard, executed in 1542, was a Howard by blood and first cousin to Anne. 2 queens of England out of one family. both beheaded within 6 years. And in both cases, the head of the family, Thomas Howard, 3rd Duke of Norfolk, sat as a judge at the trial of his own niece twice. He voted to convict both times and survived both times. The twist is that it kept going. The 4th Duke was executed in 1572 for plotting to marry Mary, Queen of Scots, and put her on the English throne. His son Philip died in the Tower in 1595 after 10 years of imprisonment for treason. 4 Howards on the scaffold or dead in a cell in under 60 years, plus a 5th who was condemned in 1547 and only escaped because Henry VIII died the night before the execution, and the family still holds the dukedom today. If your surname is Howard, your bloodline was close enough to the throne to be both indispensable and lethal. The next name held the crown for 9 days. Number 5, Grey. Grey is Norman. Most genealogists trace it to Grey in Normandy, near Bayeux, though it also appears independently as a plain descriptive nickname for grey hair or grey clothing. Both origins existed side by side in medieval England, which means 2 people named Grey in 1300 might have had no connection whatsoever. The Greys held land across the Midlands and the Welsh Marches, and split into branches that spent generations competing with each other. Grey of Ruthin, Grey of Codner, Grey of Groby. The Ruthin branch triggered a war. A land dispute between Reginald Grey and a Welsh nobleman named Owain Glyndwr in 1400 escalated into the last great Welsh rebellion against English rule. But the anchor is July 1553. Lady Jane Grey, 16 years old, great niece of Henry VIII, was proclaimed Queen of England. She had not asked for it, and by every account did not want it. Her father-in-law had engineered the whole thing, marrying her to his own son and pushing the dying Edward VI to name her heir, all to keep the Catholic Mary Tudor off the throne. Jane reportedly wept when they told her she was queen. 9 days later, the plot collapsed. Mary raised support in East Anglia. The council in London abandoned the scheme, and Jane was moved from the royal apartments in the Tower to a cell in the Tower. Same building, different door. She was beheaded in February 1554. She was 17. Her father was executed 11 days after her. And the detail that stays with you comes from the eyewitness account of her death. Blindfolded on the scaffold, she reached for the block, could not find it, and had to ask someone to guide her hands to it. If your surname is Grey, your bloodline passes through the shortest and most pitiless reign in English royal history. The next name actually gave Henry VIII what he wanted, and paid for it anyway. Number 4, Seymour. Seymour is Norman, from Saint-Maur-sur-Loire in France. In medieval documents, the family appears as de Sancto Mauro of Saint Maur, and English tongues wore it down over 3 centuries into Seymour. It is a saint's name, filed smooth. The Seymours held Wolf Hall in Wiltshire, a modest house for a knightly family. In 1535, Henry VIII stopped there while traveling on royal progress. His marriage to Anne Boleyn was failing. And there, serving as a lady-in-waiting to the queen she would replace, was Jane Seymour. The anchor is the 12th of October, 1537. Jane gave birth to Edward VI. The male heir, Henry, had broken with Rome, dissolved the monasteries, and executed a wife to obtain. She died 12 days later of complications from the birth. Henry wore black for 3 months, called her his true and loving wife, and left instructions to be buried beside her. Of 6 wives, she is the only one in his tomb. The twist is what her brothers did with it. Edward Seymour made himself Lord Protector of England, ruling the kingdom outright in the name of his 9-year-old nephew. His younger brother Thomas married Henry's widow within months of the old king's death, then schemed for control of the boy king himself, and was caught breaking into the royal apartments at night with a loaded pistol, having shot the king's dog. He was executed in 1549, signed off by his own brother. Edward followed him to the block 3 years later, continuously possibly brought down by rivals on the council. Both uncles of the King of England beheaded by the government they had built. If your surname is Seymour, your bloodline sits directly inside the Tudor succession and inside the price of it. The next name did not want the throne. It wanted to decide who got it. Number 3. Neville. Neville is Norman French, from Neuville, Newtown. The family took the name from Neville in Normandy and carried it into England after 1066. It is one of the most literal surnames in the entire English aristocracy. Their ancestors came from the new place. The Nevilles concentrated in County Durham and North Yorkshire, ruling from Raby Castle and Middleham. And by the 15th century, they effectively governed the north of England. They did it by marriage as much as by force. Ralph Neville had 23 children and married them into nearly every great house in the kingdom. The anchor is 1461 and 1470. Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, was the richest man in England outside the royal family, and he used it. In 1461, he put Edward IV on the throne. Then Edward married a commoner in secret, humiliating Warwick in the middle of negotiating a French royal marriage on his behalf. So, in 1470, Warwick switched sides. Allied with the Lancastrian queen he had spent a decade fighting, invaded and put the deposed and mentally broken Henry VI back on the throne he had personally removed him from. 2 kings crowned, 1 king unmade, by 1 man. Contemporaries called him the Kingmaker, and the name has stuck for 500 years. The twist is that it did not save him. Edward came back within 6 months. At the Battle of Barnet in April 1471, fought in thick fog, where both sides struck their own men by mistake, Warwick's line broke. He was cut down on foot, trying to reach his horse. The most powerful subject in England died in a field he could not see across, and his lands were carved up between the men he had made. If your surname is Neville, your bloodline belongs to a family that once decided who sat on the throne of England and lost everything doing it. The next name arrived with the conqueror and never left the border. Number 2. Percy. Percy comes from Percy-en-Auge in Normandy, and the place name itself probably derives from a Gallo-Roman personal name, Perseus, plus an estate suffix. William de Percy came to England with William the Conqueror and held Yorkshire land within a year of the invasion. Very few English families can document a continuous line that far back. The Percys can. They became earls and then dukes of Northumberland, and for 4 centuries they held England's northern military frontier against Scotland. That was not a ceremonial job. It meant standing between 2 kingdoms that raided each other constantly, and it gave the family something close to independent power. Alnwick Castle has been Percy territory since 1309, and the family still owns it today, 700 years later. The anchor is 1403. Sir Henry Percy, called Hotspur, a nickname the Scots are said to have given him for the speed with which he came at them, helped put Henry IV on the throne in 1399. 4 years later, he decided he had made a mistake. He raised the North in rebellion, and at the Battle of Shrewsbury he was killed, reportedly by an arrow to the face when he lifted his visor. The king wept over the body, then had it exhumed, quartered, and displayed in 4 cities, because rumors had already started that Hotspur was still alive. That is how much the crown feared this family. It had to prove the man was dead in 4 places at once. The twist is bigger than 1 man. The Percy and Neville feud. 2 northern dynasties fighting over land and precedence through the 1450s. Is now widely regarded by historians as one of the direct fuses that lit the Wars of the Roses. Percy backed Lancaster, Neville backed York. A private northern quarrel scaled up into a national civil war. 2 surnames on this list started it. If your surname is Percy, your bloodline descends from one of the oldest Norman families to set foot on English soil, and one that spent 600 years refusing to be governed by anybody. And now, number 1. Spencer. Spencer is an occupational name, and it is far humbler than you would guess. It comes from the Anglo-Norman despensier, the officer of a great household who controlled the pantry and the stores, from the same Latin root as dispense. The dispenser, a servant's job title that became one of the most royally connected surnames in Britain. The Spencers did not rise by sword or by court intrigue. They rose on sheep. Through the 15th and 16th centuries, they built enormous wealth in the Warwickshire and Northamptonshire wool trade. And in 1508, John Spencer bought Althorpe. It has been the family seat for over 500 years. They were courtiers rather than warlords, closer to the crown than almost anyone, and yet almost never on the scaffold, which, given everything else on this list, is an achievement in itself. Burke's peerage once observed that no other family was so saturated with royal connections. Then, Diana Frances Spencer, born at Sandringham in 1961, married the Prince of Wales in 1981 and gave birth to a future king. The Spencer bloodline is now permanently inside the House of Windsor, and her brother still lives at Althorpe, where she is buried. And here is the secret. In 2011, researchers analyzed the mitochondrial DNA of two of Diana's matrilineal relatives. Mitochondrial DNA passes only from mother to daughter, generation after generation, unbroken and almost unchanged. It is the one line that cannot be rewritten by a marriage certificate. The result was mitochondrial haplogroup R30b, a lineage of Indian origin and vanishingly rare in Europe. It traced back through Eliza Kiwak, Diana's great-great-great-great-grandmother, an Armenian Indian woman from Surat who lived with a Scottish East India Company employee in the early 19th century. In the family papers, she had been recorded carefully and vaguely as Armenian. The genetic evidence, published in 2013 and reported worldwide, said something the paperwork had spent 2 centuries not saying. It means the direct maternal line of a future King of England runs not through a Norman castle or a Tudor palace, but through 18th century India. If your surname is Spencer, your ancestry is not a family story, it is laboratory evidence, and it goes somewhere nobody in Burke's peerage ever wrote down. 10 surnames, 10 threads running back through Viking settlements, Norman invasions, 30 years of civil war, a Tudor court that ate its own children, and a car park in Leicester with a king underneath it. Every one of these names is carried today by ordinary people who queue for buses and forget their passwords. Your name is not decoration. It is a record. Drop your surname in the comments below and tell me which of these you belong to and whether you knew. And if you made it this far, subscribe to this channel. Every week we go deeper into the history hidden inside ordinary names. The next video is already waiting.